A father stood outside a World Cup stadium in Los Angeles and refused to tell a reporter his name. Not because he had broken the law, not because he was hiding from police, not because he was doing anything dangerous. He was scared because of a flag, a piece of cloth, a symbol, and somehow, in the middle of the biggest sporting event on earth, that symbol had become so controversial that people were afraid to even identify themselves while carrying it. That is where this story starts. But the deeper you go, the stranger it gets. Because what happened around the Iran versus New Zealand match wasn't just about a flag. It wasn't even just about politics. It was about a question that FIFA has spent years trying to answer. Can football really be neutral? And according to critics, what happened in Los Angeles may have revealed the answer. The symbol at the center of everything was the lion and sun flag. For some people, it's simply an old Iranian flag. For others, it represents an Iran that existed before the 1979 revolution. For many members of the Iranian diaspora, it has become a symbol of resistance against the current regime. And that's where the problem began, because FIFA entered the tournament determined to keep politics out of the World Cup, at least officially. The organization has always insisted that football should unite people rather than divide them. The game comes first. Politics stays outside. Simple. At least that's the theory. But theories become a lot harder to defend when tens of thousands of people arrive carrying symbols that mean very different things to different audiences. And suddenly FIFA found itself trapped. If those symbols appeared everywhere, accusations would follow. If they disappeared entirely, different accusations would follow. Either way, somebody would be angry. What critics claim happened next is what turned a difficult situation into a full-blown controversy. Fans began reporting that security personnel were stopping people at stadium entrances. Flags were questioned. Apparel was examined. Some items featuring the lion and sun symbol were allegedly confiscated. Others were reportedly denied entry altogether. Stories spread quickly through fan groups, then across social media, then across international media coverage. And every new report created the same question. Why was this symbol being treated differently? Because the more people looked at the situation, the more confusing it became. The World Cup is filled with national symbols. Flags are everywhere. Supporters wear them, wave them, paint them on faces, wrap themselves in them. That's normal. That's expected. It's part of the event. Yet critics argued that one particular symbol suddenly seemed to exist under a completely different set of rules. And once that perception took hold, the controversy exploded, because now this wasn't just about security decisions. Now it was about fairness. Fans who felt targeted started speaking publicly. Journalists started asking questions. Commentators started noticing something else. Something that would push the story even further. The broadcasts. People inside the stadium described seeing large numbers of lion and sun flags. Entire sections filled with them. Visible demonstrations. Visible expressions of identity. Visible acts of protest. Yet many viewers watching from home barely saw any of it. And that created a brand new mystery. If the symbols were everywhere, why weren't they appearing on television? At first glance, that might sound like coincidence. A camera points one direction instead of another. A producer chooses one crowd shot over a different crowd shot. It happens. But critics argued the pattern was too consistent, too noticeable, too convenient. According to them, television audiences were being shown a carefully controlled version of reality, one that removed controversy from the picture. One that removed tension from the picture. One that removed dissent from the picture. Whether intentional or not, that accusation spread rapidly. And once it spread, FIFA faced a much larger problem than a disagreement over flags. Now people were questioning what they were seeing, or more accurately, what they weren't seeing, because trust works in a very specific way. The moment people believe something is being hidden, they start looking harder. Every missing image becomes suspicious. Every camera angle becomes suspicious. Every editorial decision becomes suspicious. And suddenly, a football match turns into an investigation. Then came the argument that really fueled the backlash. Neutrality. The word FIFA uses constantly. The word that appears whenever controversy emerges. The word that is supposed to solve everything. Neutrality. But critics started asking a difficult question. If one side is allowed visibility while another side is suppressed, is that neutrality? Or is that a choice? And that's where the debate became philosophical, because neutrality sounds simple until real-world situations arrive. The moment an organization decides what can be shown and what cannot, critics argue it is no longer standing outside the conflict. It has entered the conflict, even if unintentionally, even if reluctantly, even if it claims otherwise. That argument resonated with a lot of people, not because everyone agreed, far from it, but because it exposed a contradiction that FIFA has struggled with for years. The organization wants football separated from politics. politics. The problem is that football may be too big to separate from politics. The World Cup isn't played in a vacuum. It involves nations, governments, histories, conflicts, identities. The moment millions of people gather under national flags, politics often arrives whether organizers want it or not. And critics argued Los Angeles was proof. But then the controversy widened again, because now attention shifted away from supporters toward the players, and what emerged raised even more questions. Reports began highlighting logistical challenges surrounding Iran's participation, travel complications, security complications, operational complications, the kind of issues most fans never think about, the kind of issues that don't appear on scoreboards. But according to critics, these challenges piled up in ways that affected the team's entire tournament experience. Instead of focusing purely on football, players were forced to navigate layers of uncertainty surrounding movement, security, and travel arrangements. Every additional hurdle created a new perception, not necessarily that anyone was targeting the team directly, but that the team was operating under conditions unlike many others. And perceptions matter, especially at the World Cup, because once supporters started connecting these stories together, a larger narrative emerged. The flags, the security checks, the broadcasts, the logistical complications. Individually, each issue could be explained. Together, critics argued they started looking like a pattern, and patterns are powerful. Humans naturally search for them, especially when trust begins to erode. That's when people stop asking what happened and start asking why it happened. The distinction is important. One seeks facts, the other seeks motives, and motives are where controversies become dangerous, because once motives enter the conversation, every explanation becomes harder to accept. Every official statement becomes harder to believe. Every clarification creates new questions, and FIFA found itself facing exactly that problem. The organization maintained its commitment to neutrality and tournament regulations. Supporters of FIFA's position argued that governing bodies must enforce consistent rules. They argued that allowing politically charged symbols could open the door to endless disputes. They argued that once exceptions begin, neutrality becomes impossible. That's the strongest counter-argument, and it's not a trivial one, because global tournaments require standards. Without them, chaos follows. But critics weren't convinced. Their response was simple. If neutrality requires the removal of visible opposition, what exactly is being protected? And more importantly, who benefits? That question lingered. It kept resurfacing, because nobody seemed able to answer it in a way that satisfied everyone. The result was a controversy that refused to disappear. Even after the final whistle, even after the headlines moved on, even after official statements were released, the debate remained. And maybe that's because this was never really about one match, or one flag, or one stadium. It was about something much bigger, the power to shape reality, because modern sports organizations don't just organize competitions, they create narratives. They determine what billions of viewers see, what they don't see, what becomes part of the story, and what disappears from it. That's an extraordinary amount of influence, which is why every decision attracts scrutiny, especially when those decisions intersect with politics, especially when those decisions affect identity, especially when those decisions affect visibility. The deeper critics looked at Los Angeles, the more they believed they were witnessing a system that prioritized a clean image over a messy reality, a reality that was impossible to fully remove. Because the flag still existed, the emotion still existed, the disagreement still existed, the cameras could point elsewhere, the broadcast could focus elsewhere, the regulations could say whatever they wanted, but the underlying conflict remained. And that's what makes this story so uncomfortable. Not the flag itself, not the match itself, the possibility that neutrality becomes impossible the moment someone decides what neutrality looks like. Because once that happens, somebody is always left outside the frame, somebody is always edited out. Somebody is always told their message cannot be seen. And that brings us back to the father standing outside the stadium, afraid to give his name, afraid because of a symbol in a city thousands of miles away from the country at the center of the controversy. Think about that. A football tournament designed to celebrate unity somehow produced a moment where people felt safer staying anonymous. Whether you believe FIFA was protecting neutrality or enforcing silence depends on how you interpret everything that followed. But that's exactly why the controversy refuses to die, because the biggest question was never answered. Was FIFA protecting football from politics, or was football being used to protect something else? And depending on your answer, the World Cup may look very different the next time you watch it.